All right, Big Beat family. I am here. I'm Charlie. Good to see everybody. And I am here with the legendary Leland Sklar, and just everybody on our station. Lee knows who you are, but just to refresh their memories, Lee is a magnificent musician, bass player, plays with thousands of people, including James Taylor, Toto, Phil Collins, Hall and Oates, currently on tour with Lyle Lovett, and is a musician in his own right. Currently, also I think you're on tour, aren't you, with the Immediate Family, or that's an off and on thing? I think.
Yeah. What's going on with the band is one of the members, Waddy Wachtel, has been on the road for like the past year with Stevie Nicks. He's their musical director and guitarist. So we haven't been able to really do anything cohesively as the Immediate Family because Waddy's been busy with this. We've done a few gigs, and we were lucky to have Elliot Easton from the Cars would come and play with us. So we got to do some Cars tunes, which was really great. But and Steve Postel, who's another member, has been out doing a tour. He was supposed to be on the road with David Crosby, and then David Crosby unfortunately passed away. So they took the band. It's going to be doing that tour, and they're doing a tribute tour to David. And then Russ Kunkel and I have been out with Lyle Lovett most of the year. And we still have another 6 weeks to go. So we did a thing with the band last night. There's a documentary movie that was made about the Immediate Family that was made by Denny Tedesco, who did the Wrecking Crew movie.
Right.
And so he did this movie called The Immediate Family. And it's been doing really, really well on film festivals and stuff. And now there's a chance of getting a Grammy nomination for music documentary. So we did a show last night. We all came into town and played. We did a screening of the movie, then a Q&A, and it was great. Jimmy Jam, the producer, came in and emceed the Q&A with us. And then after that, we did like a micro set, did like 3 songs just for the people that were there. So that's kind of where it's at this point. So we're waiting to, see what happens with that. It'd be pretty thrilling for everybody concerned if they at least got a nomination. There's a lot of great docs, so you never know who's going to win that.
Well, that is an incredible documentary. I've seen it. I've seen the Wrecking Crew too. I've recommended it to our listeners.
Right.
I've seen the Immediate Family, recommended that to our listeners too. And that's kind of it's interesting that the documentary team that did the Wrecking Crew did this one too, because you're kind of related to the Wrecking Crew in many ways, aren't you? The Immediate Family.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. First off, you have Denny Tedesco, who did the Wrecking Crew's father. Tommy Tedesco was one of the greatest studio musicians ever. And I was real fortunate that around 1970, when I really started working in the studio in earnest, I got to do lots and lots of records with Hal Blaine and Tommy Tedesco and Larry Knechtel and Mike Melvoin and Dennis Budimir and all these guys who were the mainstay of the Wrecking Crew. So I was kind of one of those transitional players that really was privileged to walk both sides of the fence. I was part of the new team coming onto the scene, but also getting to spend so much time almost being mentored by the traditionally well-known musicians. So it's been a great relationship. I went to a whole bunch of the screenings for the Wrecking Crew when they finally brought that out, and was able to sit with those guys and talk about my relationship with all of them. So we've been connected for a long time, and I'm really proud of what Denny and the whole production team put together for this film. I mean, we're still amazed at, like, we're the subject of a movie, just a bunch of old knuckleheads. So it's kind of a trip, I'll say that.
Well, I know how you are about being the center of attention. You talk about that in the documentary a little bit. One story you tell is when you noticed a few people wearing the Leland Sklar fan club T-shirts in the front row. Tell the team about that. That kind of came about kind of wild.
Yeah, well, it's one thing, we're all sidemen. Oh, just so if people are looking at this, I'm sitting in my pickup truck outside of a medical center. My wife is in and having physical therapy. from some injuries she had. And rather than make her come early and run home to do this, I just thought, well, my phone will work in the truck. So I'm
Right.
here. There's the medical center right out here. People going. So yeah,
We're
I
very
love
flexible, aren't we, these days? It just follows us everywhere.
I love tech. No, so we were doing a gig with one of the gigs we did with James Taylor back in the late '70s, I guess it was. And we were at Merriweather Post Pavilion. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue. And we walk out on stage and look down, and in the front row, like half the front row, had Leland Sklar fan club T-shirts on, and James just kind of looked down. I mean, the artist likes to be the center of attention. No matter how great they are, they kind of like that. So I just said, okay, I'll try to keep a lower profile for you. And now now I go out there like with Lyle, and I look out in the audience, or if the immediate family's working, and I see people all wearing beard T-shirts that I had made up that I sell on my website. That are the whole front of the shirt is my beard. Looks like this.
That's great. Let's talk about those kinds of artistic outlets for you besides music. You have a whole website, and you've done some paintings too, right?
Well, when I was in college, I started as a music major when I went to college, and I spent the first 2 years in college in the music department, and decided I just did not like it. It seemed like the major focus of the entire collegiate experience for me was wanting me to become a teacher. And that was really, I don't feel that at all. I mean, I'm happy to talk to people on do clinics and things like that, but to actually be a true academic music teacher was really not in the cards. I was a band guy. I just wanted to be playing. And so I went up to the administration building, and I took a battery of aptitude tests, and it came up that my highest aptitude was in science and art. And I've always been fascinated with science. That's been a part of my entire life. I never really thought about pursuing anything in science. But art has also been a part of me growing up. I was always, like, when I was even in grammar school, when they would want to have like a mural painted like with dinosaurs on it, I was the guy that was picked to do that. And I was the guy that painted, rat fink monster heart rods on everybody's notebooks and things like that. So I ended up becoming an art science co-majors, and was actually gearing towards possibly becoming like a medical or a technical illustrator. And then as chance would have it, I was in a band in the late 60s, 68, 69, called Wolfgang. And our drummer had a friend named John Fishbeck, who owned a studio in LA called Crystal Recording Studios. And John produced and recorded like all the early Stevie Wonder records, Songs in the Key of Life, and that period of Stevie's life. And he would hang out at our rehearsals with us. And one day he came to a rehearsal with a friend of his who had just come back from England, and it was James Taylor. But nobody knew who James Taylor was. He was a new artist at that point. And they had just finished cutting his James Taylor album. And he hung out with us for a couple of days, and it was really cool. Then James ended up getting offered a gig at the Troubadour, and the band that had cut that album was Russ Kunkel on drums and Danny Korchmar on guitar and Carole King on piano. I believe Bobby West may have played bass on that one. And they wanted to put together the band that had played on the record, but it turns out they needed a bass player, and James called his producer and manager, Peter Asher, and said, "I found the bass player of my dreams." And then he remembered me from this couple of days of hanging out with our band, and they tracked me down, and I went and played the Troubadour with them on this gig. And we kind of assumed, well, that would be it. Just play this gig, it'd be fun. Well, it was huge. And the next thing you know, he got offered a major tour, and they said, "Do you want to do the tour?" and I'm kind of sitting in my fifth year of college and everything, and I just went, sure, and I left and never told anybody, and never graduated. I just somewhere I've got about 260 credits sitting in a microfiche uh, folder somewhere. So it's just weird. I mean, that's the thing is I always tell people when I do clinics or any of those kind of situations, a master class, I just always try to say, never say no. If you get asked to do something, even if it doesn't feel like the ideal thing, you never know when you show up to do something. It may not be great. You may not really enjoy the artist or whatever, but you might meet somebody in a band, in the band who you connect with, and that could change your entire life. I mean, had James not come to our rehearsal, I would have probably still, gone through college and been in a completely other profession, and always being in a band. I was a band guy always, and that would have never changed. But it can be just the slightest turn of events can change your life dramatically. And so I always say to people, and then say yes. The worst that happens is if it sucks, if they call you again, you say no. You don't want to do it. But you just never know what's around that corner, and you really should try to take advantage of it. Because it could be a life-changing experience.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think a lot of folks who are getting into music or learning music, they give up a little too early or think they're not going to be a huge star, but it's still okay to understand music and learn an instrument. What would you say to kids? One of the things that we do, and I think the audience knows it, is we support childhood music education and the importance of music in the realm of education. And what message would you have for young musicians who are just starting to pick up an instrument, that think they might be a rock star or something like that, but really it's not necessarily about being a star. It's about knowing the music or knowing the instrument. What's your advice?
Well, I think the process of learning an instrument, and especially if you find yourself in a situation where as you learn, like say you're in junior high school, and then you get into the orchestra or the band at school, there's a thing that happens there about how to relate to other people, how to work with other people, how to interact with other people, that I think there's not that many other opportunities to do that. You can, to a certain extent, in sports. The only thing I see really different with sports is the fact that sports, for the most part, how it's performed is pretty cut and dry. I mean, there's all these rules about when you're playing football or baseball and stuff, and you have to adhere to these rules to play the game. Where with music, you can pretty much go down any path you want to create, and it's really an open field for you. But the way relationships develop in there, and the way people support each other, is really unique. And I feel really, really fortunate that all through school, I started playing music when I was just turning 5 years old. Um, we, oh, I think we're still good. Okay, it looked like
We're
it's really. Um, I started playing piano when I was 5 years old, and I was studying classical music. I was one of those childhood kind of music snobs, because to me, it's like classic was pretty much it. I was fortunate to be raised in a household where my parents weren't. It's not that they were musicians, but they were very eclectic in what they listened to. So they had a pretty extensive record collection of pretty much anything you could imagine. And so I was exposed to a lot of music as a kid, and it became like my path. It's one of those things you never think this could actually be a profession, because everybody, as you're growing up, kind of looks at you like, when are you going to get serious? Because you're playing music, you're goofing around, and it's hard for them to really comprehend that this actually can be a career. And so I was lucky. I had a really supportive family, and I studied all through school and had a lot of good foundation. But by the time I was 12 years old, I was kind of burned out with piano. I was sort of, to an extent, I was sort of the proverbial child prodigy, where I got it really fast, and I won some awards from the Hollywood Bowl Association when I was like 8 years old, and got to meet Eugene Normandy, the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I was doing a lot of recitals, and I was pretty toast by that point. When I got into junior high school, I kind of assumed I'd be the piano player. You know, that it was that whole kind of way you're geared up. And the music teacher said, "Look, at 50 kids are playing piano. We need a string bass player." And they had an old K upright in the back room, and he pulled it out and showed me how to hold it. And I plucked one note and felt the vibration of that, and I just went, "Let's do it." And I never looked back. You know, I really fell in love with bass. I love the psychology of it. I love the responsibility of it. I love where it sits as this kind of a liaison between the rhythm section and the melodic section of the band. You can subtly really redirect music just by the placement of a bass note, and uh, and then meeting James. The other pivotal thing for me was that when I met James and started recording with him, I think One Man Dog was the first album I did with James. Peter Asher, who was producing him, ended up insisting that all of our names appear on the back of the album. And that was unheard of.
That was the first, right? That was the very first time.
Crew never got credit on the albums that they played on. So when people were listening to the Mamas and the Papas and the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean and Frank Sinatra, they had no idea it was the same bunch of musicians in the studio doing all those things. But suddenly we were kind of honored by having our names on it. And it was the beginning of that singer-songwriter movement of the beginning of the 1970s that really did change the scene, the kind of the face of music dramatically at that point. So when the labels were all hunting down singer-songwriters, they would look at James's album primarily at that point, because James was really at the forefront of this whole new movement. And they would see me and Russ Kunkel and Danny Korchmar and all our names on the thing, and they'd say, "Well, I mean, if those guys are good enough for James Taylor, let's see if we can get him for our project." And literally, I mean, I went from having absolutely no studio experience. The only time I'd ever been in a studio was when our band Wolfgang went in the studio for a day and cut some demos. That was my entire music experience in the studio. And the next thing I knew, I was like one of the first call guys in town and working, 3-4 sessions a day, 6 days a week. So we were we were learning on the job, and knock on wood. I mean, this is one of the things too, where I encourage people really to hone their craft, because we were fortunate that an opportunity came along because of James and Peter. But had we not had the chops, had we not had the skills, it might have been somebody would hire you once and go, "Oh, this guy's kind of suck," and you might never have worked again. But we were all fortunate that we were really worked so hard at our craft that when the opportunity came, we went in and kicked butt. Yeah. So it was because people a lot of times will say, "Man, you guys were so lucky," and I go, "No, we were fortunate, but we weren't lucky." I mean, I spent from 5 years old on studying my craft. So it was one of those things that it was very fortunate that an opportunity came along that was really a profoundly powerful opportunity. Because had James not been James, had he just been another guy that I might have no, it could have been nothing, but here's this guy who suddenly is changing the face of music. And I was fortunate enough to be there and meet him, and he remembered me. And the next thing I know, we're working together, and we were together for 20 solid years together.
Wow. That is amazing. And I think what the audience, especially the students, would take from that is use your downtime to hone your craft, never say no, and take every opportunity to put it to work. It takes work and a little bit of luck and the right opportunity, and it'll come.
And another aspect of that is it also depends what you want to do in music. I mean, I ended up falling in basically to the world of studio work. Now, I was fortunate that having come from a background on piano, I was a really strong reader. So once the opportunity to start doing studio work came along, I had the opportunity to, when people realized that I was a good reader, suddenly I was doing TV shows and movies and jingles and dates that required reading, where still a lot of players I know can't. I mean, I look at one of my favorite bass players in the world is Pino Palladino, and Pino kind of almost, he always says, I can't read music. He's got a great ear, but I go, it's not that hard a thing to do. But if you don't want to be a studio player, there's a ton of bands and artists out there that can't read music, that don't know any of the real true fundamentals of music, that have very successful careers. So, it depends what you want to do. If you want to pursue like the world that I live in, then you really need to have a whole lot of tools in your toolbox. But if that's not important to you, you might be able to get away with everything with a a vice grip and a screwdriver. It's you use the vice grip as a hammer and everything. It's not correct, but you still might get the job done.
Yeah, those are great ways to look at it. Now we on our station we focus around the genre of 70s rock, but we play a little bit of everything. And sometimes we play the influences of rock. We play jazz, we'll play blues, we'll play soul. Most of our audience loves that. Sometimes we get pushback on it because of the focus on a certain genre. But how would you define, your catalog is vast and very varied widely. How would you define a good song?
Well, I think that's kind of like peeling an onion, or eating an artichoke. You keep working through it and there's more layers of it. I mean, certainly it's great if you're working on a lyrical song, to have a song that has some meaning to it and isn't just sort of random words that somebody's thrown up, but actually, I was blessed in those early days to work with like James Taylor and Jackson Brown and all these great writers who their lyrical content is so poignant. So for me, to be truly satisfying, it would be nice to have a lyric that tells a story that can connect with you on a certain level. Certainly, the caliber of musicians expressing that music is important. I mean, you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if the guys or gals can't play it, it's just not going to happen. So all these things come together. I just finished doing. I was just down in Nashville working with Reba McEntire, and the first song we were cutting, it was great because they're still cutting old school down there. There was like 7 of us in the band on the session.
Nice. That's good to know. That's good to know that.
Yeah, and we were working on the first tune, and we had an okay arrangement of it going, and then Reba just kind of went, I'm not feeling this song like the ballad I was told it is. We could play it. It clicked, but there's this truck driving by here making all kinds of noise. There's a malleability to music where you kind of listen to something and you kind of go, it's just not right. Let's change the tempo. Or sometimes you're working on something and it just doesn't sound right. You go, is this key too high for you? And suddenly you drop it a whole step and it takes on a whole other just texture to it. So there's all these things, like tempo and instrumentation, lyrics, and especially when you're in the studio, so much of it is predicated on that other member of the project who's the engineer. Because if you're not getting it conveyed to the medium, be it tape or if you're going to digital, Pro Tools or one of those other digital formats, If it's not getting recorded properly, you can listen back and you think, God, this sounded great out there, but it sucks in here. So there's a lot of levels to all of this stuff. But the thing that's fun sometimes is when you just cut something and everybody looks at each other and goes, "Oh man, that's it."
Yeah.
But again, I've worked on projects where we finished something and I went, God, that was great, and then it gets canned and it's never heard. It never gets released. And I've worked on other things where we all kind of look at each other and said, "What a turd!" And next thing you know, it's the next thing you know, it's the #1 record. So no,
That's fun.
well, the thing to me that really is poignant about music is, and I think the arts in general is how subjective it is. Like I always tell people, I said, you can go to an art museum and be standing next to somebody looking at a painting, and you have tears running down your cheeks. You are so emotionally connected to that painting, and the person next to you is going, "This sucks," and you're both
You're both
right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many times with music where you hear something and you go, Jesus, really? And yet, it's like one of the most popular things out there now. Somebody's loving it. So
Yeah.
you have to be, aware of that. There's going to be all kinds of different aspects to what we're, dealing with now. As a studio musician, it maybe requires me and the guys of my ilk to be more open about music, because you never know what you're going to get called for. And I've done everything from jazz to polkas to funk to electronica, all kinds of stuff. And you have to go in with an open mind, and you want to really give it everything you've got when you're in there. So it requires maybe a little different listening perspective when it comes to music, rather than somebody who goes, "I only like country music." That's all they listen to, and that's all they want to play. And that's fine. That's valid. It's just you're not going to be able to do what I do if you wanted to do it, if you've got that attitude, because you may be having to play on things that you're not digging. And that's really unfair to the artist. It's unfair to the audience. You should, enjoy what you're doing.
That's great. Great advice. Also, I want to be very aware of your time, and I'm very thankful for
No,
the time.
we're good. We're good. I'm good until she comes staggering out here.
I appreciate it. So let's talk about the future. You've got a few more weeks with Lyle, right?
Yeah, we've got a couple of gigs. We've got a festival we're playing in Lexington, Kentucky on, I think, the 18th of next month of September. And then we go up to Chicago to do something. And then we're off a couple of days. And then I think the 27th, we actually start the second leg of the tour, and we'll be out until early November. And most of that is down through Texas. And we're playing a couple of nights at Tipitina's in New Orleans. And we're down
Oh,
through
neat. That's where I'm at right now, New Orleans.
Okay, well, we're going to be down there, I think, the 8th and 9th of October. And
I think I'll pick you up in Dallas. I live in Dallas, so I'll pick you up there.
Oh, cool. But it's there's a bunch of crazy stuff going on. I was just in the studio. We're finishing up a new album with Barbara Streisand. I'm doing a heavy metal video with an Italian artist named Alessandro Del Vecchio from Italy, and I did his album remotely while I was on the road with Lyle. He was sending me tracks, and I was doing all the bass parts in my hotel room. And he said, "Look, I'm coming to LA. You want to be in my video?" So I said, "Yeah, let's go." And then I just talked today to Herb Peterson, who's one of the great guitar, banjo, bluegrass singers, and he's working on a project. He just called me to ask if I could spend a day with him. And there's another project I'm doing up in Ojai. So there's like all these like couple of day different projects going on. But once we hit the road, we're pretty much slamming until November, beginning of November. And then whatever the rest of the year is, I don't know. But Lyle's the acoustic group, because the thing we're doing when we go back out is still the large band with the 15 players. But then at the beginning of the year, we start the acoustic group, which is like 5 players in Lyle. And we'll be out, I think, like February and March with that as of now. So It's one of the things I always think is a moving target is harder to hit. So you just keep on going. And I feel really, I I still pinch myself every day that I get to do this. Oh, I'm sorry, I was resting my hand and it was in
Oh,
front of the camera.
that's all right.
But
That's all right.
you kind of sit there, and I mean, I'm 77 years old now, and you kind of go, by now, I didn't think, first off, I might even be alive, let alone still working. So it's one of those things you just kind of pinch yourself every day and you go, man, this is good. I never take anything I work on for granted. I just look at it every day and just go, this is great. I'm really excited about getting the phone call and going to work. And it's I don't see an end in sight unless I get to the point where I'm arthritic and I can't play, or some disease or something takes it away. But as long as that phone rings and I can play, I'll say yes and I'll show up.
Well, it absolutely comes through, and our audience recognizes it. Your energy towards what you do. We've all seen you. We've all seen you. We see you playing, and we see you play a song that we know you played countless times, and somehow when you're playing it, it looks to us, and I think it's coming through as sincere that you're playing it like it's brand new for you too. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do you do that?
Well, I try. First off, I try with every performance, um, be it in the studio or being live. Um, I don't fall into patterns with these things. I just kind of look at it and I go, what else can I do on this one? Let me make it a little bit more unique, a little bit more special. And even in the documentary, I think I talked about Fire and Rain, James Taylor, and I said,
Yeah.
I've probably played that song 1,000 times, and it's only a few chords, but every time I've played that song, I always think in the audience there's somebody who's probably hearing us play that for the first time, and that's who I play to, not the person who's heard it 500 times out there, even though it is for them too. But there's something where you always go, there could be something special about this one for somebody. So it's really fun. And I also I kind of think, I I just don't find playing tedious or boring. People, they'll start to say, "Oh, you guys are just, you play those same songs." I go, "Fine, it's an adventure. It's an adventure every time, and every time you're with some different players, um, or a different venue, different audience. There's nuances that change them every time. So it never feels like you're just walking through it. I've never felt that at all. If I got to that point, then I'd quit. If all of a sudden I thought, I play it the same every night, I'm bored now. But I'm still going out and doing it. It's unfair to you. It's unfair to the audience. So I'm still pumped. I still dig it all.
That's
I'm not.
great. And it absolutely comes through. And for people like me, I mean, if you're the artist, I guess that makes people like me the curators, kind of, the people who look and see and hear and try to get it out to other folks and let everybody hear what's going on. And it's just a joy to see you and all of the big band in the current case, and of course the immediate family and all that's going on. We're excited. I hope the Grammys come through, and I hope you decide to go on an immediate family tour. I mean, I think that's
I
really good.
I I hope so. The thing that's really funny to me is if I'm in town every year, there's there's the Grammy show that's televised that you see in the evening, where they give away about 8 Grammys and there's all these big production. Well, during the day, there's the pre-Grammy show, and the band that plays I'm part of the house band for that. We end up with at least 80 pieces of music to do during that show, and they give out 80 Grammys during the day, and it's all of like world music and tech stuff and all these other categories that'll never be shown in the evening. And I just was sitting there thinking it would sure be funny, because I think the documentary award is given that day. It would really be funny if we won, and I couldn't go up there because I'm in the band playing the walk up and walk off music.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so we'll see how that all goes. But that show is so much fun. If anybody wants to check it out, the two guitar players on that project are Tim Pierce and Dean Parks, who are two of the greatest guitar players in the
Sure.
studio. And Tim has a really great video showing the whole daytime show and all the music that we did
Oh,
for that.
really? Oh,
So
wow.
if you're on YouTube, just pull up Tim Pierce. You can probably pull up Tim Pierce Grammys 2024, something like that. But it's really worth watching. I mean, we had this huge production number with Kirk Franklin and all his singers, and and Larkin Poe and all these different people, were performing at the thing. Sheila E. And
Wow.
it's fun, but from Tim's perspective of going through all the songs and all that we played on it, because you're playing everything on that show from Chick Corea to Kiss to you name it. I mean, we get
Mhm.
much music in it, and a dear friend of mine, Cheche Alara, is the musical director and keyboard player on it. And he's probably the best MD I've ever worked with, and so they should check that out. It's pretty cool.
And check out your own YouTube channel too, right? You're out there all the time.
Yeah, no, I'm up, I've got about 1,750 videos up at
Mhm.
this point on there.
Yeah, great. They're great. All
Yeah,
right. Well, I appreciate your time. Please stick around. I'm going to turn the audience loose, and then you and I will close out. But the great Leland Sklar, everybody, thank you so much for your time and spending time with our audience, Lee. We
it's
appreciate it.
my pleasure anytime.